Hello, everybody. Good evening. Thank you so much for joining with the sounds of the city in the background. My name is Tiara Ebony Austin. I use she and they pronouns, and I am the Artist Engagement Coordinator here at the Laundromat Project. I am a Black woman wearing a gray shirt, a green head wrap, and I am up against a white background. Just to start, I wanted to share a quick note that you do have access to closed captions at the bottom of the screen. I'm really happy to have you all join us tonight to celebrate Jamel and his wonderful, wonderful practice. I'd like to begin by offering a land acknowledgement as we begin all of our public programs here at the Laundromat Project. The Laundromat Project respectfully acknowledges that we are in Brooklyn, the occupied and unceded lands of the Canarsie, who are part of the Munsee Lenape. We recognize them as the original stewards of this land and pay respects to their elders, past, present, and future. We acknowledge and offer deep gratitude to this Lenape land that supports us as we are gathered together. I invite you to join me in that acknowledgement, that respect, and that gratitude. Thank you. So for those of you who might not know about the Laundromat Project, we are an arts organization that advances artists and neighbors as change agents in their own communities. We do this through our Create Change Artists in Residence and fellowship programs, as well as our creative community building initiatives and our public programs. Our Create Change program is the LP's flagship annual artist development program that supports the learning of a community of artists who are invested in developing a critical community-based practice via workshops, coaching, guest speakers, peer support, among many other offerings. Our open studios, what we're gathered here tonight for, are an opportunity for our artists in residence with the Laundromat Projects to share commissioned works in progress and for you all to get a glimpse into their wonderful practices. I have the wonderful, wonderful honor and privilege of launching our second Create Change residency open studio of the year with Jamel Burgess as a part of the 2022 program. For this session, feel free to populate any comments that you have in the chat. We love having ongoing engagement and conversation in the chat. And if you have any specific questions for Jamel throughout the presentation, please use the Q&A section of Zoom or the chat throughout the program, and Jamel will address them during the Q&A session as time allows. We will be recording this session and it will be remain public on our YouTube channel for later viewing. It is with great pleasure that I now introduce the artist of the hour and all around brilliant, warm, and wonderful human, Jamel. Jamel Burgess is a multidisciplinary artist and community organizer. Through music production, Jamel explores musical lineage, sound manipulation, and hip hop production. Jamel has over 10 years of experience producing instrumentals and received a hip hop production degree from Queensborough College before completing a self-directed musical degree centered in art and activism from the New School for Social Engagement in 2021. He is also founding member and former president of the New School's Hip Hop Collective. Jamel has organized in East New York for 15 years, working with various advocacy groups and organizers from across the city. He was awarded the Next Generation Leadership Award from the Cypress Hills LDC and community recognition from former council members and assembly members representing District 37, excuse me. Currently, Jamel is the studio program manager at Groundswell and a fellow of the Institute for Nonprofit Practice, New York cohort. Jamel is committed to music and art as tools to educate youth and create community change. Take it away, Jamel.
Thank you so much, Tiara, for that introduction. And thank you all for being here with me tonight. It is really an honor to be here. And I know y'all could be doing anything in the world right now, so being here for the open studio means so much to me. I want to kick off my open studio with just giving some appreciation, obviously, to the folks who are here, but a special appreciation to the Laundromat Project for partnering with me this year, allowing me to be an artist in residency, and to the entire LP staff and team. Investing in this project is investing in me and my community, and it means so much. So thank you all for your work and your support this year. And I also want to give a special thanks to all the East New Yorkers who I have interviewed already for this project, and the folks that I will continue to interview and contribute to East New York archives. So whether it's images, videos, folks have contributed so much already, and there's so much more to come with archiving East New York. And with this project, I want to stay rooted in the importance of memories and awareness that memories matter. And when folks are sharing their stories, it's really precious and it's valuable. And it's truly an honor to be able to hear your stories, and to be able to host them on our platform for other folks to hear, to be inspired by, and to educate people on our community. So thank you so much. And so I'm gonna share my screen. Can folks see that? Cool. Awesome. So yeah, as mentioned, my name is Jamel Burgess, pronouns him, his, and my name Jamel. I am wearing a button-down shirt with glasses and a Yankee cap, surrounded with a white wall behind me. And my project is Archiving East New York. And so a brief overview of tonight. I'll open up in the spirit of sharing stories. I'll talk a little bit about who am I, how I got here, my personal artistic practice. I'll also will engage in a listening session where we get to hear from some of the folks who have contributed to the archive project. So again, just special appreciation to the folks who have shared their voices and stories already. Tonight we'll get to hear from some of them, and also see some archival images of East New York and Cypress Hills neighborhood. And then we'll talk about the future of archiving East New York. So this is truly just the beginning of the project, and just a glimpse in what I've been working on. And to show it all, or to be able to document and share in 1 hour is just impossible. So what I will do after sharing some of the work is talk a little bit more about what's to come in the future of archiving East New York for the rest of the year and in the future. And we'll also get a chance to hear from the East New York Community Land Trust. So special shout out to the CLT, some folks who are here tonight. This is one of the partners that I'll be working with over the year for the Archiving East New York project. So we'll get a chance to hear from people who are on the ground doing amazing work in East New York and talking about their current campaigns in the neighborhood. Yeah, and then lastly, we'll close out with a Q&A. So as Tiara mentioned, folks could utilize the Q&A or the chat. We'll definitely hold some time to respond to some questions. So cool. So to get started, I'll start with the beginning of my story. And yeah, my story starts with my mother, Anna. So Anna Burgess, my mother is from South Carolina, and she moved north to the city with my older sisters, and she raised too many kids, if you ask me, 2 generations. And her and my sister became first-time homeowners in Cypress Hills, East New York in the early 2000s. And you know, I wanted to center my mother in this story. One is just reflecting on how I got here and, you know, my work in service and community. I always was surrounded by, you know, my brothers, my sisters, nieces, sometimes brother-in-laws and uncles, just a really large family that really contributed to my family orientedness and being around just a lot of people and being in an active household. And even though we never had like a picture perfect family thing, we had love in our home, and that was perfect enough. And when I think about the work that I do, I'm doing my work from a lens of love and doing community-based work in service of others, and working to improve like myself and my community. A lot of that is inspired from my mother. So before it was like terms of being an activist or organizer or being cool to to say you were doing that type of work. My mother always was doing that and involved with, you know, taking care of our household, raising families, doing work on the block in our church. She always was active. And so when I reflect back on my personal story and where I am and how I got here today, it really goes back to my mother and my family. So I just wanted to start by bringing her into this space and starting with the beginning. I attended the Franklin K. Lane High School campus, and in Franklin K. Lane, I joined this youth advocacy group called Future of Tomorrow. And FOT is a youth organizing group based on the Lane campus that worked on school reform and education policy, as well as a focus on improving school climate and education, just trying to improve the quality of school and services in our school for students. So while I was young in school, and that's one of the images of me much younger, yeah, I fell into this group, and FOT is such a critical part of my story and my journey because FOT was my introduction to community organizing and community work. FOT created a space for me to think outside of like the non-traditional classrooms, being able to engage in political educations, explore different organizers and activists, reading or referencing Malcolm X and other great leaders, bell hooks and things like that in that program. It also allowed me to develop a sense of pride of my community in a way that I didn't have prior to joining that group. And so I wanted to share a little bit about FOT and how important it was for me, because this was like that introduction to youth organizing, to being in school, being in community, doing quality work, and then also developing that sense of pride and the early passion of doing community work. And so after completing high school and going off into college, my story with FOT would come full circle because I would return to FOT as the lead organizer for the program years later. And so again, it was like a full circle moment. I went from being a young person on the campus, advocating for school reform and education policy, to now actually leading some of the work that was happening in my community and on the campus. And I really just enjoyed being able to work directly with young people, to lead workshops and to support young people in finding their voices in school around local level issues, but then also citywide and statewide policy. And so a key component or key area here during my time at FOT as the lead organizer was in 2015, Mayor de Blasio had announced the rezoning of Cypress Hills, and that created like a surge of real estate speculation and changing of the neighborhood, of like prices on homes and just the fear of displacement and things like that in the neighborhood. So in FOT, we kind of was a part of that movement of fighting to protect Eastern New York and advocating for a community-based plan that would reflect our community and yeah, basically just combating that gentrification and displacement that was taking place in the neighborhood during that time in 2015, 2016, and the years to come. And so while I am learning about doing youth organizing and doing this community-based work, I also have this passion in music. So music production has always been, something that's been dear to me. Music has always moved me. And whether that was being a young person, listening to gospel in my mother's choir or in my mother's church, or listening to the radio and recording samples or my favorite songs from the radio onto cassettes, things like that. Music has always just played a significant role in, just who I was as a person. And in particular, hip hop production, hip hop music was something that moved me. And it wasn't so much the lyrics that was moving me, but more so the samples. So in sampling or in hip hop, there's a practice, an inaugural practice of hip hop is sampling. So that's traditionally when a DJ would loop a certain section of a record, or they would find a break over a record, and then people would creatively express over that part of the vinyl. So whether it was rapping or breaking or whatever elements of hip hop, it was rooted in this practice of utilizing the tools that they already had. So vinyls, records from their parents' collection or whoever, to create this modern style or sound of music. And yeah, I fell in love with that part of the production. So I started collecting records and vinyls when I got into music production, and studied music production in Queensborough Community College. And at the time, I didn't use the term like, oh, I was an archiver, but being able to collect vinyls, that was my introduction to some form of archiving. So whether it was collecting records that had percussions or sounds from, West Africa, or some soulful samples from the 70s of Aretha, or the Supremes, things like that. And then being able to have like those physical items to read about studios that once was or no longer here, record labels and things like that. That became my passion and influenced my music production style. And so I have this passion for music production. I have this passion in doing community work in East New York. And for a couple of years, I was thinking of the connection, the intersection of these works. So being able to find where does the intersection, what does it look like for me to be able to combine my passion for music and passion for community or audio looks like. And while studying at the New School, I was thinking about actual oral history. So like capturing people's voices, the voices of the community, in some type of creative way that could positively influence my community and stay true to both of my passions. And so while studying at the New School, I did the self-directed class where I started working on East New York archives. And yeah, just a little bit of context of East New York. East New York in the 1960s faced a severe flip in the racial makeup of the neighborhood. So the neighborhood was predominantly made up of white people prior to 1960s. But during the 1960s and 1970s, through racist real estate practice, intentional divestments, block busting, which was a real estate or a practice that real estate folks had used to devalue the homes or create fear mongering tactics to move white families out, even folks who wanted to stay in the neighborhood, by telling them that their houses were losing value, and then moving Black families in at extremes amounts of like having them overcharge for houses and then losing houses. And it was just a really a horrible practice that basically turned East New York into a ghetto, right? So, and as I mentioned, I love East New York. I'm from East New York, and I know the beauty and the richness of the community. However, historically, when folks will reference or talk about East New York post 1960s, it always was associated in a negative light, right? And so I was thinking about how could we create a space or some type of digital platform that can challenge that dominant negative narrative. And the one way to do that is by having folks from the neighborhood share their stories and reclaim our stories and speaking our truths. And the way to do that through my East New York Archive project was to create this digital platform of incorporating community voices and also multimedia. So images of the neighborhood, showing the beauty, showing the resilience, and uplifting the pride and just the resilience and grit of our community. And so I'm talking a lot, and I want to move over to actually get a chance to actually hear from some of the community members that I've interviewed so far. And then I'll talk a little bit more about the East New York Archive project. But yeah, so tonight we'll get to hear some of the audios from some folks who have lived in East New York for some time, and just to bring them into the space, we'll get to hear from Linda Coco Floyd, Neil Lass, and I want to give a special shout out to Neil Lass. Neil Lass has been working with me on this project for over a year now, and he actually contributed a lot of these images to the archive. Also, some of these images we're looking at now. So just a special appreciation to Neil. Wayne Barson Harris, Dharma Diaz, Joyce Scott Brayboy, and James Saunders III. And so, as mentioned, this is just a glimpse of some of the folks that I've been speaking that have contributed their stories. And I'm looking forward to being able for y'all to hear from them directly.
Well, welcome to my home, Jamel. I am Linda Coco China Ford. So when we moved in, we had chickens and cows and horses. Summertime here was heaven. Like usually coming from a southern background, I'm Caribbean and southern, little mix in there. And normally we would go down south for a summer vacation, but not here. We had the horses, we had the chickens, we had the swimming pools, we had the bowling alleys. When I grew up out here, it was nothing but mountains and mountains of land. That's all that was here in land. We was also able to pick strawberry and peaches and blueberries and apples. So it was a year-round living, even though it started in its origin that it was mostly swamp lands and desolate and, vacancies and emptiness. But through that emptiness, there was the roses that grew. And I consider myself one of the roses that was nurtured and grew up in East New York and still living in East New York.
My name is Neil Last. I lived in East New York since I was 3 years old, which would make it 1955. It was nothing short of great. I wouldn't trade it for anything. I lived more than any of my friends. I lived through the greatest change. When I first moved into my building, there were only 2 black families in the building. When we moved out of the building, it was the complete opposite. We were the next to the last white family to move out of the building. And when I was I was surrounded by people that weren't like me, it was still home. I can't explain it. It never changed from being home. It was always home. It's interesting. When I got older and the word ghetto entered my vocabulary, and I got to see it from another person's eye that, they called where I lived the ghetto. We would never use that word. We never called it that. That was just, we lived in the projects.
My birth name is Wayne Harris. So it was just an open community, man, and a real authentic good time, and we didn't even know how poor we was. You hear that all the time. We didn't know how poor, because we made magic, but we made magic. Not a birthday went by on a block, not a major holiday went by on a block, even holidays we shouldn't have been celebrating. We was out there and there was a big spread and we had memories. But if it bleeds, it leads, the only thing that gets attention in East New York, and it might be intentional, is some of the other issues. 75th Precinct having the highest, for years we had the highest amount of murders in the precinct. It was a murder capital in New York City for a while. The anti-crime unit bragged about the amount of guns that they took off the street. They never talk about the amount of illegal stops. They never talk about how many times they infringe on the rights of innocent individuals. But those are the stories that lead. And I think it might be intentional because East New York is prime real estate.
So my name is Dama Vanessa Diaz. My sister moved into East New York, Cypress Hills in 79. I moved in to my own apartment in 88. It drives me insane when you turn on the TV channels and you only hear the negatives of East New York. The media needs to understand that what they're promoting impacts people and tears down communities. Those of us that have chosen to stay here, find some honor in being from East New York. It's a beautiful feeling to see your community grow. We turned around. Now people come from other neighborhoods to see what we have, to learn from us, to see that enough of us took our struggle, learned from it, and grew from it. We don't need people to come into our communities that Captain Save a Hose. Don't save me. I got this. I survived this long. I'm a warrior. Don't do me any favors because I've been here long enough. Thank you.
My name is Joyce Scott Grayboy, and I have lived in East New York for approximately 25 years. Well, when I moved to East New York, I moved because one of my friends who I used to hang out with out in Far Rockaway, we were very good friends. I went to visit her one day at her new apartment in East New York. And I looked at the area. It was an up-and-coming area. There were new homes being built on the block. And I remember this block from back in my teenage days that I was scared to walk down the block. But on the same block that I was scared to walk down, they were building up new homes, and my thought was, it wouldn't be bad to live over here because there was new development coming up. It was on Milford between Dumont and Hagen, and that area was plagued at one point with drugs and all kinds of stuff, and I found a home there. And I love it. I love living in East New York. And we just watch the elders in the community. That's how you learn, That's how I was raised learning. I watched my grandmother. She was the founding mother in her church, St. Paul's Community Baptist Church, which is right here in East New York now. It started out on the other side in Brownsville, and then it came over here to East New York as the population grew. The good is that we have thriving people over here. We have people from all sectors. East New York has grown so much in the past couple of years. It went from desolation to, booming, thriving economy. If you can go from Gateway on one end to, what's the other end, or Highland Park. It's a huge community with all kinds of people. So, that's it. We're here. We're a community of love and people who care. And we have all of them, from the young to the old, all kinds of people. Latinos and Black American, Caribbean American, African. And, the main thing is that we're all related in some kind of way. Dealing with this community, we're all related and we try to work together. I have a passion for community. I do it because I love being involved in the area. I want to make East New York great.
My name is James Saunders III. That's my official name. I'm known as James Saunders. I live here over 30 years. Well, since 67, I lived in here, East New York. So 67 to now is what? I don't know what that is. That's interesting. I look it up now. I gotta use my calculator because I didn't think about it to now. 2022, 1967. 55 years? Oh my gosh. Yeah, been here a long time. I grew up in a block that was basically family oriented. A lot of families here. We all, grew up. So a lot of us basically looked out for each other, like most blocks did. So we had a situation where the block is always live and full of energy, and block parties every summer. And we also at the time we had a park at the park. We had a pool at the park, swimming pool in the park. We had certain little leagues going on, growing up in the neighborhood. So actually my life, my experience here is basically living through my father, his image in the community. And he was a 73 Precinct Council president, and he was a block association president, and he was a community leader in his own right. He had voice here in the community. He's always at community board meetings. He's, like I said, he's 75th Precinct Council president. So he did a lot of things, and interesting that Charles Barron actually was the one who helped push the fact that you get a street sign named after him, and which done in, I guess, 2003 or 2004, after he already transitioned already. He did a lot of things. He, made sure that people always. He believed in beautification, so he made sure we were always part of I think it's part of the whole beautification thing years ago when they saw that whole process with the block associations. And he's in the know. He's like, okay, sanitation supposed to be here a certain time. Where they at? And why they didn't clean up this? What's going on? And like I said, he's 17 Precinct Council. What's going on? Why we don't have programs for kids? Where's it at? And what about the singers? What's going on with the singers? Why do the singers don't have programs? What's going on with the singers? Why they're not getting the services they need, the resources they need? So he was very active in a lot of those things. A park across the street was called the Miller Avenue Park, which is later turned to the Martin Luther King Park. And my father was one of the people, if not the person, that actually suggests that it should be named after Martin Luther King Jr. So outside of that, I ended up running the Miller Avenue Block Association Senior Citizen Program when my father died in 2002. Different things I was able to do to support his causes and his efforts and represent my family. But so the neighbors got along. They loved. Some created families amongst themselves. You know what I mean? So, and that's indirectly and directly. Create families amongst themselves as they grew up. And it's like my mother. My mother transitioned in 2019. And I never knew that so many people loved my mother so much. They were talking about her pork chops. And I say, what? Say, yeah, I can't wait to go Miss Saunders pork chops. Like, oh, wow. I didn't have that story. I never knew the story, And that's what I'm saying, how you have, and of course, when you go to different people's, when different people transition, you hear those stories about how some families that you didn't know existed or actually connected by things that you never thought about. You never thought they were connected by, So that's a good idea. That's a good way I can say bridge to how families got along in East New York.
Awesome. There I go. Thank y'all so much for listening to some of the voices of folks who contributed to the project. One of the key things about this project is thinking of who writes history. And so, as I mentioned, East New York has historically been associated with impoverished conditions or being a ghetto and so on. But when we think about communities of color, when we think about communities that have gone through so many difficult and challenging times, how is an accurate history of that community documented, and who gets to tell that story? And so that's the main goal with Archiving East New York in this project, where community voices, images, multimedia, and it could be central in a space on this digital platform that we'll be creating, where folks' truths can be told. Some of these images here are directly from the New York City's archives, where I spent a lot of time looking at some historical articles around the neighborhood, and there's a lot there. However, when we think about traditional archives, who is accessing it and how accessible is it? So that's another one of the goals with this project, is to be able to streamline this rich history of the neighborhood that highlights the Black and brown folks who built up East New York for it to be the community where it is today, where folks are coming in and trying to purchase or change a neighborhood. And so, like many neighborhoods across the city and across the country, when they are facing gentrification and displacement, we know that a community's culture can be erased and diminished with the changing of the neighborhood as different class and different folks move into those neighborhoods. So it is important to have that clear documentation of who is from that community and the rich history of that community. And then also thinking about how could those stories and the accessibility of that rich history, what could that do in a current movement of folks working to preserve and protect those neighborhoods and communities of color. And so the last part of this is this slide that I want to close out on is just introducing you to Mr. and Mrs. Patterson. These were two homeowners from Cypress Hill, not from Cypress Hill, excuse me, from Central East New York. They lived on Georgia Avenue back in the 60s. So during that intense blockbusting period that I talked about, that flip of the East New York neighborhood. And the Patterson family were on their block association, and they organized their block on this campaign to fight the blockbusting that was taking place on their block. And one of the tools that they used was they hung these signs of "This house is not for sale." And they had everyone who owned their home, the Black folks and the white folks who want to stay in the neighborhood and keep the values of their homes where they were and not just get people pushed out, was to hang these signs. "This house is not for sale." And again, this is from 1963. And so when you fast forward and you think about the current changes of the neighborhood, when I talked about the rezoning of East New York, Cypress Hills, there was a similar call or actions of people saying their homes were not for sale and East New York was not for sale. And so there's this direct connection of what has happened in the past and how that also has influence, or it repeats itself in modern time. And so when folks are out there in the streets organizing, what difference could it make to know this rich history? How could it inspire people and educate folks who are doing the groundwork in our neighborhoods? And what also came out of some of those audios, and also from my story as well, one thing in East New York, there's this through line and this connection of family and organizing in East New York, Brooklyn. And so with the Archive in East New York, we'll be working with young people this summer, doing a series of political educations, introduction to oral history and community organizing, and as well as continuing to contribute to the larger East New York family in a positive way and through our project. And so I would love to bring up Al Scott from the East New York CLT and Boris Santos, if he's present. So as mentioned, we'll be partnering with folks from the neighborhood who are doing some groundwork in East New York. And Al Scott is one of the folks from the East New York CLT who's been organizing around campaigns in the neighborhood. What's up, Al? And I just wanted to give the floor to them, some of the folks that are actually doing some of the work in the neighborhood, to talk about their work. And yeah, I'll stop speaking. Al, please.
Man, Brother Burgess, man, I say this is great work that you're doing. I often say this in the East New York Community Land Trust meeting, the story must be told, and it's better told when it's by us and the importance of that. So the future generations can learn and build upon it. And just this whole streamlining, the whole breath that you took from the folks that survived it, then folks that are fighting back, and then folks that are thriving is so compelling. And then, as I always describe, you bringing in the future leaders into this initiative project is so very, very crucial and important. Again, everyone, my name is Albert Scott. I'm with the East New York Community Land Trust. Also here is Boris that you mentioned, Brother Burgess. He's on here as well along those lines. And real briefly, I definitely just want to share some of the important things that we're doing. Basically, what Jamel has shown here, we're just standing on the shoulders of giants, of the past experiences, learning from it and building upon it. With the East New York Community Land Trust, it's just we're looking to utilize this tool, which is the central concept of simply ownership of land, public land in public hands. When we say community, we should also tag along that word ownership along those lines as well. And in the pursuit of community ownership, we see this community land trust, better also known as the CLT, as a tool to address the toxic housing inequalities, the toxic economic inequalities that is happening in our communities. And as a result, we utilize this as an organizing tool to address it. One of our first campaigns was addressing to abolish the tax lien sale, in which this city tool way of collecting taxes, for example, was weaponized more or less against communities of color. All I have to say here, and Brother Burgess can attest, that organizing works, and we're looking, and we won some battles, but we also approaching to winning the war along those lines. In addition to that, in some academic circles, they know this as a white paper. We're about to release our black paper out here in East New York, where we identified public land that's either underutilized or not utilized properly to help address the housing crisis that's happening here in East New York. In addition to identify community economic opportunities for our community as well. And we definitely on May 21st, we're looking to release this report to the public. We're going to be over on Sutter Avenue. If allowed, we definitely like to post that information, and hopefully Brother Jamel could definitely share that as we look to release that information to the community. This was put together by a strong, diverse, working class group. And that's majority of the members of East New York, a strong, vibrant, working class along those lines, which is just simply want a better life, as what Brother Jamel was saying, the common denominator, family. We fully aware the impact of housing is so critical, because if the prices continue to go up, how can we even save? What type of disposable income we actually have to send our children to college, or to even think about owning a home or to owning a business? So it's very key, and this community land trust model is so key and so important. But I definitely want to give some space to Boris just to add his thoughts and his comments in regards to the East New York Community Land Trust. Is he there?
I don't know if Boris is on.
I don't think Boris was able to join us tonight, unfortunately.
Oh, okay. But these are the a very important tool as far as the East New York Community Land Trust, as we look to identify public land, so it could be truly affordable for our community members, giving our community members a fighting chance to stay in their community, to grow in their community, to thrive in their community. Because what I've learned when I was watching your video, Brother Jamel, I was just complete awe. I'm like, we are truly standing on the shoulders of giants. Nothing is new under the sun. The same fight we have today, I'm looking at, it's yesterday. And it's just, some people just said, enough is enough. And organizing simply works. And with the East New York Community Land Trust, we're definitely making some key strides, and even addressing the environmental impact. It's so ironic that East New York, for those that may not know, is the gateway to the world. We're transit rich. We're 15 minutes to the airports along those lines. And now we're seeing all the quote unquote infrastructural benefits and things of that nature coming to our community. But there's always a caveat along those lines. They try to displace us or try to utilize, we will fix this if you allow upzoning, for example. No, that's called environmental racism and even planned shrinkage along those lines. You're supposed to do your job. We deserve those infrastructures anyway. Why that have to equal to upzones that actually in the end displaces our community residents? So our community has become more savvy, much more informed, and much more willing to fight back and understanding these quote unquote technicalities in ways that only benefit, for example, just the city and the developers. They get their contracts, they get their monies, while we get pictures, pretty pictures, and promises along those lines. And our communities definitely deserve so much more. But I just want to, this program is just awesome. The Laundromat Project. Thank you. You know, we the East New York Community Land Trust definitely will be working very, very closely with you, because the story must be told. 90 years or 100 years from now, they're going to realize we set a strong foundation, and I'm very excited, hopeful the future generations will pick it up and continue to carry that torch along those lines. So your work is so valuable. I'm just so proud. This is just awesome, brother. Just awesome. I'm in awe. This is awesome.
Thank you so much, Al. Really appreciate you. And again, special shout out to the entire CLT folks who, have been on the ground doing the work. And many of the organizations out in East New York. Also want to shout out to Penny Preserving East New York, who we'll also be working with. Just talking about some of the things that's coming in the future. We'll be doing some type of oral histories / walk and tour with Preserving East New York. And then with the CLT, Archiving East New York, will be having an oral history pop-up station on the Juneteenth for a block party in East New York, Brooklyn. So if folks are from the neighborhood or just interested in coming and want to hear more about that, yeah, we can drop that information as well. Again, that's going to be on Juneteenth. And again, just as Al mentioned, the purpose of the Archiving East New York is preserving our past for our future. So folks can look forward, backwards, and know that connection, to stay inspired, to be moved, and to also take direct action, as Al had mentioned with some of those upcoming events and the campaigns that they're doing. So I just want to say thank you all again. I'll pause here and open it up for some questions, and then we can wrap up.
Thank you so much, Jamel, and thank you so much, Al, for everything that you shared so far. We do have a few questions. The first one is coming from Robin Walker Murphy, who says, what was one thing you were surprised to learn about East New York during your research process, Jamel?
Thank you, Robin. That's a great question. Well, one, the Mr. and Mrs. Patterson story, definitely that. So yeah, I mean, it's crazy because it's like the 60s, and just a little bit more information. They were from, they were from Jamaica. They were immigrants to the country, and probably by some way ended up, because of redlining and stuff that was going on, ended up in East New York. And, they got active in their neighborhood, and they were organizing, and it was like through regular block association. So as I mentioned too, thinking about my mother, so it wasn't like the nonprofit. I mean, I'm sure nonprofits existed, but it wasn't all of that. It was like churches. It was day-to-day people, Black associate, like just regular people organizing, mobilizing their communities, and improving and like fighting these larger systems at hand, and I guess the other thing too, was how sinister the assault was on East New York. So you think about how communities of color are divested from, and it's kind of crazy when you read like you read the articles, you hear the way folks in the neighborhood will refer to when it started becoming more Black and African Americans and Puerto Ricans in the neighborhood. Just like the pulling of sanitation, the corruption in the local precinct, just everything. And everything was they just let it fall. Like East New York there was an attempt murder on a community, and it was sanctioned on a city level and on a federal level, and as I was mentioning, as I hopefully these stories that we'll be able to capture can show, folks got through that and build community up, day-to-day people, and turned it into what it is today. And so just learning about that was really eye-opening.
Thank you so much. So the second question is for you, Al. Can you share a little bit more about the win with Arlington Village to inspire the audience? Catherine Mbali Green Johnson believes that this is important to unpack how that happened and to model what success looked like.
Kat, great to see you virtually. Awesome, awesome leader out here in East New York as well. I would just start by saying, organizing works. When people turn pain into power, it's a beautiful thing. Just to give a quick background, in the East New York rezone plan, their initial plan was to identify a certain portion of East New York. We all knew during this time, folks had a lot of questions. Not only community members, but stakeholders were like, what is a rezone? What is the economic impact? What are the social impacts? What are the transit, the health impacts? All of these questions. And then once individuals start asking those questions internally, what happened is folks started to form collectively. And as we dug deeper and deeper into this East New York rezone plan, we realized that under its current introduction, this is a displacement tool disguised as something that will be beneficial to the community. And in the original plan was to also to include this particular development known as Arlington Village. Arlington Village is a community rent stabilized, has rate stabilized units there. A beautiful, beautiful community. It had a lot of neglect, but once the rezone was mentioned, that was a dog whistle for speculators to come. They then purchased Arlington Village on the hopes that the rezoning will go through, and as a result, they can then do a quick flip. So they purchased these Arlington Village, let's say for 30 million, but then they were trying to then sell it for like 60 or 80 along those lines. We knew what that was. That was a cash grab, one. Number two, displacement of seniors, displacement of families, and through the organizing efforts. When I can't stress that enough. I wish this was live in person so y'all can really feel my energy in the sense that organizing works, people turning pain into power, the organizing, how people came together, and then the end result was the rezone plan excluded them, cutting them out of the rezone plan. So if they wanted to do any upzoning at that particular project, they will have to go through the normal process rather than them simply building as of right. If that was even included, the negative economic impact on the community definitely would have been devastating, not only for the existing residents, but it then had micro impacts and triggers throughout the community as well along those lines. And it's very important, I stress that the importance of, at the time, we was using everything, social media, everything to rally on folks, technology at our fingertips. We didn't know it well then. We got to figure this thing out. We have to do, because at the time, to get publicity from the media, it's so funny. And you mentioned this in the video. Someone mentioned this. It's so funny. The media presents what they want, which is the crime and things of that nature, whereas the majority, the good, triples, quadruples the bad that happens in our community. But what's magnified is that, and we're so much more than that. So it was so impactful, and that it was so impactful and energizing to know that folks can organize and actually seen a win, even though we didn't want it at all. But just for that, just to send a message to the real estate industry, the speculators and the investors that tried to do a quick flip, and just fast forward it to present day. Now they're trying to do an up zone of Arlington Village. In the meanwhile, folks are still have people, gas is not working. They're utilizing hot plates along those lines, and they're using other nefarious harassment things to get folks out of their rent stabilized units. And we're in the process of organizing those folks in the sense of a political education. We even bought the council member, and we had an outdoor speak out in which she heard and listened to the residents and stating she will stand and she's committed, took a tour of the area so she could feel the passion and the anxiousness of this community. But we're much more prep and vigilant, and to know we had that success that carries over, and those residents know that there's folks, they're not alone in this particular fight along those lines. But the takeaway is organizing works, turning pain into power. That means doing something rather than just ignoring it and hoping something will happen.
Thank you so much, Al, for that wonderful walk. I'm just like feeling very charged by all the words that you're saying personally. So I just wanted to share that. And just how special I think the grassroots level of organizing is. And with that, I guess I'm thinking of the fact that you, Jamel, have youth coming in, right? And you're really thinking about how to engage youth in this fight and these ongoing fights, right? And for that, one of our attendees is wondering what your summer program for youth will look like, and bringing youth into the fold in your work and in these conversations with organizers and as organizers themselves in their own right.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for that question. And so for the summer, we'll be hosting a series of workshops for a small cohort of around 6 young people from around East New York neighborhoods, and they will be entering some type of introduction to community organizing, so a 101, looking at the history of community organizing. So some like larger movements, but then also narrowing down on the more local movements of East New York. And Al just gave a great example of, the organizing around removing Arlington Village from the rezone plan and having that go through its own separate process, or the tax lien sales. That was actually a citywide thing that the CLT worked on to have that be discontinued. So it'll be an introduction to community organizing, some political education around that, and then also an introduction to oral histories, where young people will go back into their neighborhoods, starting with their families and on their block, with interviewing folks and contributing to the archive, right? So right now, I'm piecing together this content, this platform we created, and it'll be a turnkey. So when young people start, they can be some of the early contributors to the archive in real time by interviewing their family members and folks from their blocks. So yeah, a combination of introduction to oral histories and community organizing. And then some type of in-person celebration that we'll be having in the fall as well.
And Brother Burgess, and I ask that every 10 years, let the same youth, that the original, stay in touch with them. So 10 years later, let's see what happened, and continuing. This is just awesome. I'm so excited. I'm just so excited about this.
Thank you, Al.
Yes, definitely. I am too. And so this question from Maria Ter the pious, sorry if I butchered that. For either of you or both of you, has there been an identification of free community spaces available to East New York community members to get together, to increase dialogue and or make art? And for Jamel, has this surfaced so far in your process? Folks who are looking for spaces to come together, specifically like within your oral histories, if folks are in search of free space?
That's a great question. I just want to go back to, I was talking about the young people, and then I'll get to that second question. I feel like this is very important to say. The young people will get paid. We paying our young people for going out there and doing the work. So that's just me saying, make sure you pay the youngins, very important. Yeah, come for the money and stay for the revolution, right? In regards to space, one of the other, and this comes up again, those were just clips of some of the oral histories. Some of them are like plus an hour long. And so in some of those conversations and some that I didn't share, folks do talk about space. So envisioning what community spaces could look like in the future. And I know Al could talk about this too. In conversations, folks have been envisioning like what is a cultural space looks like in East New York, or space for gatherings. And so that is like visions for creating that, but then also utilizing some of the spaces that we do have in the neighborhood. So there are some spaces. I feel like there's always room for more, or looking at other places where folks can gather in person. I'm really excited to hold an in-person event in the fall for like the closing of, or the closing exhibition of this project, and simultaneously launching the digital archive to the public. Yeah, I don't know if you want to chime in and talk a little bit more from the CLT's perspective around space.
Oh, thank you. Definitely want to chime in. For the short term, definitely there are some community spaces, but there are not enough, as Brother Burgess has mentioned. Within our Black Paper report, in which we identified public land, and we're looking to, we speak in the affirmative when we get this. When we fight for this and we get this public land, in this report, it actually sketches out. It's really awesome. I'm encouraging everyone to attend May 21st. It actually sketches where the community spaces will be. And this was all based on community input. The East New York Community Land Trust did surveys during the pandemic months, believe it or not. What are their thoughts? What are their visions for this specific public land? And they would always mention some form of community spaces, something for the youth, something for the seniors, and even some for the working class folks in the community. Because believe it or not, we may work 60 hours a week, but we do contribute either on the weekends to help to community along those lines. But for the short term, there are some community spaces, but they're just simply not enough. And as for the whole vision for the future of community spaces, we definitely identified some key aspects to that, which is definitely detailed and laid out in our Black paper, in which we will be releasing on May 21st. And all of this was based off community input, because that's the main thing our community always says. No one asked me, what did the community think? So we made sure under Community Land Trust, that is so vital, we get their input along those lines, because community spaces are very, very important, especially in a community like ours, where it's being targeted by the speculators and the investors and things of that nature. So it's so important for us to have spaces where we can connect and go. In addition to, of course, the technology aspect, but humans are synthetic, touch, feel. We got to see each other in person sometimes.
So wonderful. Yes, I'm definitely ruminating on access to space and the importance of intergenerational engagement right now. So I think we're at our last two questions. We have 3 more minutes for a Q&A. But for you, Jamel, has your oral history project impacted how you think or feel about music production in any specific or interesting way?
Yeah, definitely. I didn't mention this just because of the sake of time, but the brief clips of alt music that was played on that visual were actual recordings from musicians associated with East New York. So one of the second songs was from a record from the Franklin King Lane High School campus jazz band back in the 80s. Don't ask me how I got that vinyl. But yeah, it was something that I sampled. And then also there's audio in the background of the neighborhood. So what I've been also thinking of, like going into public spaces from the neighborhood, capturing the audio and then incorporating that in music. So it's very subtle, like, but again, for folks who might be audio or music nerds or interested in diving deeper down that rabbit hole, thinking about, oh, this is what a community sounds like or feels like, and then pairing it with visuals or oral histories that can move people. Yeah, those are things that I've definitely been inspired by and incorporating in the project.
That's really, really wonderful. So our last question is coming from Terrell Ford, who wants to know if, I guess, either of you are working on any financial literacy programs for youth or the community. And I can also throw in maybe if you know of any, if you're not.
I guess I'll say briefly, like for the archive, I think, well, one is, let me say, there's the importance of financial literacy. There's also the importance of home ownership, land, all these things, right? So, and not in like ownership of like, I own this dominant way, but again, when we think about how East New York was flipped, how it got in this position, it goes back to the housing and to the land. And that's why I'm partnering with the CLT, because it's so important that folks have that ownership and that protection of the land that is for the people, folks from that neighborhood. And I think financial literacy mirrors that, it's right next to it. And so I haven't been able to focus on that, but I do see that as a part of the project and long term. And Al, I don't know if that came up in some of those surveys that the CLT had did. Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah, I would say definitely this. Housing justice is economic justice. And then what folks have communicated and I had stated briefly is based off the rents, I don't even have enough to save to open up a business or to send my kids to school, or so you hear about these economic challenges. So the financial literacy component is okay. That's why we're introducing into this concept of economic cooperatives. What does that look like? There is so many industries and things of that nature. So folks can then start thinking about the ownership model. Little bit make much. There's a way we can all pull our little pennies together, for example, and then create something on a true economic scale. So we're introducing that component slowly, and it's going to be a robust stuff. But this is just based on feedback when we interact with the community, and the feedback that's simply stating, I don't even have enough disposable income after rent alone. I'm not even including the food, the light, this, that, and some other economic challenges, but there is economic cooperatives and there is some key opportunities. And a prime example is this. What would it look like? Let's just throw out this industry, the cannabis industry. What would an economic cooperative look like for that? In our community, we have folks that work as security guards, folks that work as taxi drivers and things of that nature. I'm not thinking about the growing of it, but eventually you're going to need a component for folks to transport it, have to have definitely some key security. Do you see that true value chain? And what would it look like if 10 of us, you have a car, I have a car, we can get together, or we can use the same car at just 24 hours a day, 8 hours. You understand? So just thinking about those specific lines, that there's a will. So that'll be that aspect of our financial issue as far as the cooperative economics models. What do you have? You understand? And then we could actually come together and see what that could look like. Because they have it in home, they have home healthcare economic cooperatives. nannies cooperative. You'll be surprised in regards to this cooperative structure, but they only usually people just think when I say cooperative, oh, housing. There's some more economic and business models to that as well.
Thank you so much. Honestly, I want to thank both you, Jamel, and you, Al, for this wonderful offering to learn, to reflect on the rich cultural history, the organizing landscape of East New York. And thank you for bringing your voices and so many other crucial voices into the room. And also thinking intergenerationally in the way that you did that, really. And Jamel, thank you so much for bringing your archival work and bringing voices in that way. That's, yes, a big round of applause for that, and sharing such wonderful clips. Like, we got a film experience, y'all, in the middle of this, and it was wonderful. I also absolutely love how you laid the foundation of your stake in this work by sharing your personal history with us. That was just wonderful. And thank you so much, Al, for just letting us know about the movement that's happening and continuously has happened historically on the grassroots level in East New York, and for your work in East New York Community Land Trust. And I'm just ruminating on the phrases, East New York is the gateway of the world, y'all, and also the ways that we can preserve our past for our future, right? I really hope that everybody who attended tonight got a chance to learn more about Jamel's practice, to connect further with the kind of work that the LP is involved with and the things that we prioritize as an organization. And also wanted to offer a thank you to our LP team who worked behind the scenes to make tonight happen. So Siobel Shikotenka, our community engagement manager, Andrea Gill, our programs coordinator, Brittany Greer, our community arts engagement fellow, Emma Cologne, our media and storytelling manager, and Lady Sasha Jones, our artist engagement manager. I thank you also to all of our funders and supporters as well. And again, for all of our attendees, thank you for taking the time to be with us tonight. We have several upcoming programs that are being shared in the chat. If you have not done so yet, you can also follow us on social media and also follow Jamel on social media. I'll get Jamel's handles dropped in too. And you can subscribe to the LP's email list and join us next time and see how we are making art, building community, and creating change in real time. And we hope to see you all soon. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your night.
Thank y'all so much for dropping in.
It was my pleasure. This is awesome. This is awesome. I love it.